Hi and welcome to Insight's Industry Immersion Series. In this series, you will meet data scientists from all across the world as they come and discuss what's trending in the data science and AI space. Let's begin today's episode of Industry Immersion with yet another speaker.
Srini, so before I go any further, Srinidhi has been with the math company for a while, and he's a senior partner. So Srini, how we'll go about through the session is if you can kind of spare some time walking about your background, how did you kind of start your journey in the analytics field, and then how do you end up being at the math company, and what are the things that you are doing right now in the industry? So if you can give a brief intro about all of these things to the audience, and also give us a fair overview as to what are the things that you plan to capture in today's session. So over to you, Srini.
Absolutely. Thanks for that, Suchit, and thanks for the very generous introduction. So good morning, everybody. So let me just introduce myself so that you know who you're talking to and where I'm coming from in some of the things that I'm talking about. My name is Srinidhi Rao. I have been in this industry for about 15 to 16 years now. So I was after graduating from the college, I was in TCS for a few years, predominantly in New Jersey area, and then I decided to quit my job and do my MBA in Kelley School of Business, Indiana University. And something interesting happened, when I was in Kelley. So I was, mastering in supply chain, majoring in supply chain management, and I was looking out for internships, right? And I came across this company called the Otis Elevator Company. You guys might have heard about the company, Otis Elevators. So they have the biggest market share in the US when in the elevators, but in India also they are kind of present, okay? So they were in a very interesting scenario where they realized that they can't sustain manufacturing in the US anymore. Okay, so Bloomington was the supply chain headquarters for Otis, just like many other companies, because Bloomington is the geographical headquarters, center of the North American region. So they had the manufacturing and the entire supply chain hub there. They realized that they cannot sustain manufacturing in the US anymore. So they decided that they will also outsource all of the manufacturing to Mexico and China, and they will just become a logistics only company, which does import, assemble, and install. Okay, which basically means that you have 2,000 people working in your factories. You have to lay them off in a matter of 6 months on the one side of things. Other side of things, you need to figure out the new supply chain network. What does it mean to the logistics network if you are not manufacturing in Bloomington anymore? Right. So where do you have your need to have your warehouses, and how many warehouses do you need to have? Right. And what is the best way to cater to customer needs while there are supply chain risks involved, because getting stuff from China and Mexico, and there are so many uncertainties involved in that and stuff like that. Right. So they wanted somebody who could design this entire new supply chain network. And me being fresh out of college, looking for a supply chain internship and stuff like that, this was like the perfect marriage of what they're looking for and what I bring to the table. And that happened to be my first analytics project in life, which happened to be a very, very good one. So I just happened to be super lucky to be the right person at the right time. So I designed the entire supply chain network, how many. Okay, I think the host has stopped video, Suchit.
Yeah, I think the host has stopped the video. So okay. That's okay.
Fine, yeah, exactly. No
what you can, are you going to share a presentation?
Yes.
Yeah, so let's pull up the presentation. As long as people can hear us and see what we are presenting, I think that should be fine.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. All right. So that happened to be my first, analytics project, and then life only became better from there with respect to analytics. So it was a very super optimization project, as you guys can imagine, figuring out where all how big should the logistic network, where all should be the warehouses, how many warehouses should be there, right, and what is the fastest path for the trucks to meet the SLAs for the customers and stuff like that. After that, I joined a bunch of different consulting firms and did some very interesting things. The predominant one being creating a recommendation system for this company called Macy's. So for those of you who don't know the US scenario, Macy's is probably the biggest apparel store, similar to our Bangalore Central. Right? And so it's a like apparel retail network, and they wanted to create a .com. They realized the .com is the next big thing. And for Macy's.com, we created a recommendation system, and I'm talking about a time, 2009 timeframe, where collaborative filtering was the most next gen thing out there in the world, and the world has moved on from there by now. So we did that and a bunch of interesting things. And in 2011, I came back to India and joined this company called Mu Sigma. I don't know how many of you guys have heard of Mu Sigma. So at that point in time, Mu Sigma was the world's largest pure play analytics consulting firm, right? And I started leading the retail portfolio. So I used to run all the retail accounts, from Walmart to Radio Shack to a bunch of other retailers, JCPenney, etc., bunch of retail customers, and as well as .com retail customers from Walmart.com, eBay, etc., so did a bunch of very, very interesting projects here. Again, that was a time when the world was realizing that analytics can be the next big thing for them and a very, very big source of competitive advantage. So they were looking for use cases that can give them quick ROI. First of all, to see that okay, if this thing really gives value, and secondly, to prove to the rest of the organization. What happens in most companies is that there'll be one or two believers, and then the rest of them will be skeptics. So the believers have to prove to the skeptics that this actually gives value. So in both perspectives, they had to do some very quick projects that can give them value within a matter of months. So we had a bunch of very interesting projects there, from assortment optimizations to self-paced optimizations to what are the kind of bundling you should do, to private label strategy, how many unique SKUs of the same category you should have in a given shelf, and also how many of them should be private label versus how many of them should be branded ones, and stuff like that, right? And of course pricing and other market mix models and other more standard ones. So very interesting 6-year stint. And then in 2016, we started off this company called the Math Company. Okay, so what used to happen, what we realized as we were doing so many of these projects was that, very few projects, I would say less than 30% of the projects, were really seeing the light of the day. So they use some very kick-ass math and, some very good algorithms behind them, but still none of them saw the light of the day in terms of actually going to production and giving value to organizations. And then we looked around and see what's happening. The issue was twofold, right? One is that the models or whatever the analytics was happening was kind of created in some kind of a silo because the analytics folks in the client organizations weren't able to translate this back to the business language and interact with business very, very effectively, due to which with the confidence level of the business folks on these models or the data behind was very, very low, right? That was one part of the problem. Second part of the problem is that the business folks themselves weren't equipped enough to ask the right questions, believe in something called analytics, and believe that that can give better value than them taking decisions on a gut basis, etc. So there was a twofold lack of trust, and we saw a very good opportunity here where we can actually help organizations realize the rest of the 70% of the value, and that's why we started off the Math Company, to actually help organizations realize the value of analytics rather than doing models for the sake of doing models. And that's where we are. So as of today, I run the innovation team for the Math Company. So innovation involves everything that is that challenges status quo, right from doing the right set of projects to challenging customers in terms of telling, why are you doing this, you should be doing that, to creating a bunch of very quick tools, next gen analytics tools that can give very fast time to market to customers, rather than building something from scratch that will take many, many months and stuff like that. So anything that challenges current way of thinking is what we call as innovation, which basically means that entire company is about innovation. Yeah, here's where we are today.
Awesome.
Any questions before I go further?
Yeah. So, Srini, I mean, that was quite a journey, I would say. I mean, especially when you realize that there are a lot of complexities that kind of go around you. These are things that this is happening all across you. But realizing that customers don't need such complex stuff to be explained directly, and simplifying things and making them more reasonable for the end users or the stakeholders. And that is where you came up with the idea of the Math Company. That is a beautiful journey that I think all of us can learn from. Mm-hmm. So first things first, Srini, in this entire journey that you just explained, where do you think, or what do you think are the biggest challenges when somebody is starting off an analytics company? So all of you started Math Company. So what was your biggest hurdles that you faced initially? So before you actually get into the actual discussion today, we would like to learn some of these nitty-gritties.
Yes, absolutely. You're talking about challenges involved with starting the company itself?
Yes.
Oh, great.
So in India, analytics company that does extensive, I would say, complex activities. Okay. What are the challenges that you faced when you started off with the company called as the Math Company?
Absolutely. That's actually a wonderful question. So I would say challenges are n-fold, as you might know, in starting a new company. So let's leave aside the normal stuff that anybody would face, with respect to starting companies. But let's focus basically on the analytics field itself.
Absolutely.
So there are a few things that that are a real hurdle. So one is that the perception of people, especially when you go to the higher levels in the clients, and when you talk about a new startup from India, typically they think of us as a bunch of techie geeks. Right now, if a techie geek says that I'll come and build a model for you or build a complex algorithm for you, they trust you, right? And whereas there is a feedback to talk slow. Okay, sorry.
Yes,
Whenever I talk super fast, please slow me down because I tend to speak a little fast. Please keep reminding me.
I think Sandeep has reminded us. So if you can talk a little slowly. And friends, we are facing some challenge with video. So please listen to what Srini has to say. Video, we'll see if we can enable. We'll try to enable. Otherwise, the more important point is listen to what Srini is saying very carefully, because this is coming right from the person who's done it firsthand. So please pay attention to what Srini is speaking. So Srini, please go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So when you go to the US or anywhere else in the world and say that, okay, I'm a startup from India and I'm doing something interesting. If you say that you're building a complex model, okay, people say, oh yeah, I want to see that model, right? So people trust you when it comes to, being a techie geek, right? Whereas if you say that, okay, I want to advise you and help you actually realize value from analytics, which is like a pure play advisory role. Right. And I'll, of course, do a lot of analytics in the background, but I'll actually help you realize value from this analytics. Then they look at you with a skeptic eye telling, boss, I know my business is better than you do. So that is the first hurdle, getting confidence or credibility from a customer, especially at a higher level, VP and above, that team based somewhere out of India, is going to help me, and in terms of being able to me realizing value from my work. Right? So that's the first hurdle. And you have to actually prove and have some very tangible use cases and referenceable customers, right, in order to actually get their credibility. And getting that first customer is always the biggest problem. Right? And that's where having worked in the past, and having built up a network of people who will trust you helps a lot. Right? So whoever gives you that first break is your god.
Awesome.
So that's the first thing, right? Secondly, on the other side, so that's the demand side of things. And once you have 2 or 3 or 4 good use cases and case studies, then we'll start believing in you, and it's just about a matter of kicking the accelerator pedal. Whereas the other side of the problem is the right talent itself. How do you build the right team so that you can supply the demand that you have created, right? Now, this field, again, there are a lot of techie geeks who can build very, very complex models, right? Now, while that is important, I would say it's just the cost of entry to this field. But in order to be able to actually add value to the customer, what we need is a people who are cross-functional, for lack of a better word, who are very good when it comes to math and technology, but at the same time equally good when it comes to having a perspective about the business and how it can solve, right? And who look at these 3 things holistically rather than just being able to build a very complex random forest or SVM model. Right, that is a very hard skill to have, because it requires perspective, it requires experience, it requires very innovative ways of thinking, a lot of curiosity. Right. So that was that is the other side of the problem, where we have to get the right talent and groom them, because this kind of talent doesn't come ready-made in the industry. So that is the second aspect of the challenge that we have always faced, and then working towards both sides of the problem. As you know, building any business is basically a marketplace. On the one side, you create demand. Other side, you need to create the supply, and you need to match these 2 things.
So primarily 2 major challenges. One is where you find it hard to onboard customers because you're just a new face in the industry.
Yes.
And the second point is getting the right people to do the actual stuff. So getting the people who understand the subject, who understand how to solve problems. Now, there's one more angle which I think I personally faced this challenge big time. And if you could help me understand, and for our friends here as well, how big a challenge does data pose? Now, in Indian companies, I remember one of the consulting that I had done some time back. This company barely was capturing data in the right way. So it was a rice industry, so they had no idea what to do with computers, and they were not even capturing data properly. So have you had to kind of undergo such a situation? And if yes, how did you solve this problem?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. And yes, we have data challenges all the while. Even the Amazons of the world have data challenges, and you might not believe me when I say so, but it's true. All right. But of course, different industry. So it depends on the industry, it depends on the geography. Obviously, Western countries are a little more ahead when it comes to being able to collect data as compared to some of the Eastern countries. And within the company itself, there are some functions that will be generally a lot more savvy with respect to data and have made some investments in the past as compared to other organizations. So that's always the case. Now there are a bunch of ways in which we deal with this. One is that you first of all start doing something with respect to whatever you have, so that you start showing some value. Okay, that's first step. So that you start creating like a positive cycle of data-driven decision making. Right? But it's not always possible, because if you don't even have the basics, it's very hard. Right? And second thing is that there are some things that you can procure very, very fast. Even if you don't have the right data, you don't need to wait for 2 years or 3 years to build the right infrastructure before you can, you can actually create and start generating value. So that's the second aspect of things. Right? And thirdly, you can do very innovative things with respect to creating some proxy data. Okay. Now, one of the companies, I don't want to name the company, it's an Indian company. They wanted to test us out. Okay. And they posed a challenge to me, with respect to figuring out the overall what is the impact of work stress, right, on the quality of the deliverables on one side and attritions on the second side.
Okay.
Now, okay, great. Yeah, sounds like a very interesting problem of a company that really cares about their people. Okay, great. Okay, but the question is, okay, how do you measure stress? So we did a few things, but the most interesting thing was we started measuring the number of coffees that are taken from the coffee machine. Right? And while it's not a perfect indicator, it happened to be a very, very close indicator of the stress level. So we measured the number of cups of coffee had during days that we thought were kind of little less stress on the floor, versus the days of big deliverables, etc. And we saw a clear pattern where there was high correlation between number of coffees used and number and the amount of stress on the floor, and we used that in the model, and it gave us quite reliable results. And yeah, of course, as we pointed out, they can always help people procure data, especially in cases like CPG and retail and stuff like that. There are the Nielsen's of the world that can quickly provide you some data. It won't provide you your transaction data, but things that are good indicative of where you stand with respect to the industry, and you can use it for some basic insights.
Okay. So yeah, if I summarize it correctly, so we should start with what we have. Second is build over a period. So continuously you keep improving, and you can probably also give insights that these are data points that we should ideally capture. And based on that, you actually build more solutions and build more trust accordingly. Right? And the third thing is when you are facing shortage of data, we can always look for parallel information such as a proxy data, which could be indicative of the same situation that your customer might be facing. So these are the 3 points that at a very high level, if I understand correctly, right?
Yes, but I would add a 2B under the 2, which is basically procuring some outside data from all the sources outside, from Nielsen's and IRIs of the world, which can give some very quick insights for you and help you do some quick analysis.
Awesome. So do you imply that it's around research data, market research data?
Yeah.
Or like the market research companies do?
Yes.
Okay, so something on those lines where you can get third party to collect data for you.
That's
okay. Excellent. Yeah. So I think these 4 points are the ones which we would want to highlight. So Srini, without any further delay, I think this was a good starting point for all of us. I'll stop sharing my screen if you can share your presentation now, and we'll get started with the discussion.
Yes. So actually, guys, today's presentation was supposed to be twofold. Originally had 2 parts. One is the first part where I wanted to really talk to you guys about what it takes to be a translator in this field, and why translation is such an important part of analytics development lifecycle, and how you guys, being data scientists, can be good translators so that you're more valuable than your peers. Right? That's the first part. Second part, we wanted to focus on some of the trends in the analytics industry today that you guys should know as data scientists. And one of my colleagues, Saurav Ghosh, does it extremely well. He talked about the same thing in Cypher and other places. It's a very interesting presentation. But unfortunately, he had a personal emergency, so he's on the flight to Kolkata as I am talking right now. So we will, leave out the second part and maybe do it in a future opportunity, maybe next month or something. So right now in this session, we'll just focus on the first part. So which basically means that I can probably give you back some time. So let me, start sharing my screen. And generally, most of my sessions are, face to face, due to which it's very, very interactive. It's very hard to reproduce that here on the webinar, but I'll keep taking a pause, in between so that you guys can, ask any questions on the chat window. Okay, with that, let me share my screen. All right, can you guys see my screen?
Yeah, so we can see the presentation here.
All right. Okay, all right. So let's begin, guys, with the story of one of the large fast food chains in the US. One of the largest fast food chains. It's not very hard for you to guess which one it is. Okay. So this chain had a problem. Okay. So they wanted to increase the sales of their milkshakes. Okay, so milkshakes is one of their important offerings on the menu, and they wanted to increase the sales of milkshakes. Okay, and the problem given to the analytics team was, okay, how can I sell more milkshakes? Right, as simple as that. Right? And how do you think the analytics team would have gone about? Right? So analytics team, being analytics team, right, as you guys might have rightly guessed, went on doing analysis based on whatever data they already had, right, and doing some very interesting things. Okay, so they started digging into, slicing and dicing into, okay, what are the demographics of my customers, right? And the thought process is that I look at the demographics of my customers, and I will look at similar customers who are not purchasing milkshake today, and maybe send them an offer or whatever. Right? That's the normal regular thought process. But unfortunately, what happened was that there was no particular demographic, that was standing out when it comes to milkshakes as against their normal customers or the normal American population. It was spread all over. Then they looked at, okay, where do these guys live? And they figured out, okay, they live all over, right? So they live on all the four directions of any given, store. Okay, what else do they buy? And they had all kinds of patterns where a customer came in only for a milkshake, to customer came in and bought a milkshake and a burger and fries, to customer who bought an entire family and bought a bunch of milkshakes and a bunch of, burgers and fries, right? So there was no particular pattern at all. Right? And they looked at how often do they come. They realized that, okay, again, there are all kinds of patterns. There are a bunch of customers who come on a daily basis. There are a bunch of customers who come like, once in a few days, etc. And when do they come in a given day? Again, there were customers who are coming in the mornings. There is a peak in the morning, peak in the afternoon, peak in the evening, just like the rest of the store, right? So there was no particular pattern, with respect to the milkshake customers against the normal customers. So they were intrigued. Okay, how do we go about figuring out, what's happening here, and how do we make sure that we sell more milkshakes? Right? Then they went back, and some intelligent guy came and said, okay, guys, let's take a step back and look at, okay, what do these guys buy milkshake for, right? So why do they really buy the milkshake, right? And for which we don't have the data, okay? So we just can't go and start off, doing analysis right away. So let's take a step back. And given that we don't have the data, we don't know why they buy the milkshake that they're buying, let's go do a customer survey. And they started standing in front of the store, right, from morning to evening, and randomly picking a bunch of people and asking them, okay, why did they buy the milkshake that they bought, right? And then when they did that, they figured out that actually there are two different types of customers who are not even related to each other. Okay, so there were the morning commuters, office commuters who were coming in the morning and picking up the milkshake, right, and going because they wanted to kill some time as they were driving to the office, right. And in the US, generally, as people driving 100 miles to work is a very common thing. So they have long drives to work, right. And while doing that, they wanted to kill some time, right. And a banana would have been too heavy on their stomach, whereas a biscuit would have been too light, right. So milkshake is somewhere in between. It will help them keep up in the morning, right, and also have them fill but not too full so that they are energetic. Right, and also give them something interesting to do while they are driving. And then there are the afternoon and evening guys who are typically parents coming with the kids, And the kids ask for milkshake, and they might have said no to the kid for a lot of things from the morning, from ice cream to chocolate to whatever. And milkshake doesn't seem as bad in terms of being a junk food. Right. And and at the same time, they want to be good dads and good moms, who don't keep saying no to everything that the kid asks. So they say, okay, dad, I want this milkshake. They say, okay, go take it. Right. So there's a second type of people. Right. Now this is like golden insight, right? So eventually, once you know that, okay, this is why people in the morning are purchasing and people are evening are purchasing for something very, very different reason. Now, how do you think, right? You can make them sell more milkshakes. Okay, any idea? Let me open the chat window. Let's see. Any idea how you can make them sell more milkshakes? Wait, I'm trying to open the chat window. Sorry.
So, Srini, at the top, you'll have a drop-down, view options. So, can you exit full screen on that?
Yeah.
At the bottom, you can see chat option. Or you can see a chat on the right side. Oh, no, you exited full screen for your presentation.
Huh.
Your presentation, you could have kept it full screen.
Okay.
Zoom, you have to exit to full screen.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, from full screen, you have to exit in Zoom, not in PPT. But anyway, I think, are you able to see now?
Just a minute.
Yeah, at the bottom, you should get a chat option beside share. Share is green in color.
Share is here.
And beside that, you should have chat.
Yes.
So really interesting answers. I'll read out a few of them for you.
Yeah, that will be great by the time I try to...
So a lot of folks have really awesome insights. Some say that we can do a BOGO offer, buy one, get one free. Or you can come up with freebies for kids. So places where kids actually are more likely to purchase these items. So the parents are going to purchase, but the kids are going to ask for it. So it's by introducing toys. Something I think even MACD or somebody else had done some time back, where they did small toys with the meals. Then you can showcase certain attributes like healthiness of the food. So if some parents are like health freaks, or if people who are health freaks, they want to have shakes which are less on your, they add less calories to your tummy. So you would want to kind of highlight on healthier options as well. You have pickups. You have open stores near kids' schools or kid areas, health and nutrition stickers, banners for, go vegan. So maybe a lot of people prefer vegan option, but I think milkshake majorly would be vegan.
Yes.
Yeah. So discount on second milkshake. Okay. Yeah. Buy the first one, get 20% off or 50% on the second. That could be a good option. Weekend offers for regular customers could be protein shakes. Yeah. Introduce protein flavors, loyalty program. Okay. I think the list is huge.
Huge.
So,
Okay. I think I got a feel. Yes.
Yeah. They're close to 325 people. So I think the answers are in that order. So anyway,
yes.
So yeah, you can full screen your presentation and we can continue.
Yes.
And when you face problem, I'll just pitch it.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So yeah, all these are good answers. So I'll tell you what they did. Okay. So what they did was they did two things. One is for the office commuters, right? What they did was they tried to make the commute more interesting, by putting small pieces of banana, small pieces of, cookies, very smallly, broken pieces of cookies, etc. into that, so that, while they are, driving and trying to sip this, they get a nice surprise, while they are driving, right? And also they made sure that, the cup of the milkshake fits right into the, car's cup holder, so that, that doesn't spill, right? And stuff like that, right? And for the kid, they did something little more interesting, which is basically, of course, they made it healthy and advertise that healthiness. But more importantly, they reduced the size of it, so that parents don't feel guilty, while getting that milkshake to the kids, right? So that smaller, sort of like pancakes, right? And eventually, both the sales of both of them increased drastically, right? So this was one very proved case. Like, is actual. What I'm telling you is an actual story where where they were not able to ask the right question in the beginning, but once they were able to translate that business problem to the right analytics problem, right, and go realize that they don't have the data for it, and they actually eventually got the data and then did the project. They saw the results like n-fold increase in sales and in both the types of customers. Initially, they didn't even know that they had two different types of customers, right? So, moral of the story, yes, asking the right analytics question, which is basically translation of the business problem into the right analytics problem, can make or break your analytics project, right? Any questions? And today's presentation is all about that.
Yes, yes. This was like pretty interesting use case. And so tell me one thing, like, are you going to cover this bit that how do you narrow down to the solutions as well?
Yes. Today's presentation is all about that.
Then we'll hold it on here because maybe the first one that you want to discuss is conversion of the business problem to analytics problem.
Yes.
Okay. So fine. I think we are good here. I'll just check the chat once again.
Yeah, if you can.
Are they mutually exclusive office commuters, maybe parents? Jigna, okay. So Jigna has a question for you, which is, are these mutually exclusive? Because a lot of these commuters could actually be parents as well.
Fantastic. That's a very, very good question. Please give a big hand to Jigna from where you are sitting. So they might not be two different people, okay? But they are playing two different roles at different points of time in the day. Due to which, for the analytics purposes, you should consider them as two different customers. Whereas, yes, absolutely, yes, they can be the same person morning and the evening.
Absolutely. Okay, I'll just check one more question. So, how it increase sales? Same customers will be coming. Okay. I think Prakash implies that how would it have increased sales? So Prakash, I think this would be rather an easy answer. And Shini, if it's okay, I can just quickly give an answer. Yeah. So this is basically about people who would not have bought the bigger cups for their kids now are seeing another option where they can buy smaller cups for their kids. So now the chances of getting sold is much higher. Okay. So that is the idea, Prakash. So I think, Yashini, rest, I don't see any further questions. So what you can do is you can continue from where we left off. I'll go on mute for a while.
Yep. All right. So why is this such an important problem, right? So 31% of organizations say that, they're data driven, right? And last year, 37% of the organizations were saying that they were data driven, right? So the number of organizations that they're telling that, we are actually data driven is actually reducing as against what we expect given where the world is going. And the biggest challenge that people say is that, they are not able to translate, due to which there is analytics team, there is business team, but there is a big wall in between. Right? And for 77% of the customers find it very challenging for the business, to be consuming analytics projects. Again, exactly the same problem. There is a wall in between. Right, and 53% of the Fortune 500 executives say that they cannot consider data as a business asset yet, although that is where they are investing. They still cannot consider confidently that data is their biggest asset. Again, because data is sitting on one side, analytics team is sitting on one side, business sitting on the other side. Right? So the translation is not happening. Right now, guys, in this entire for the rest of whatever minutes that we are going to talk about, I'm going to use the word translator and translation as synonymously. Don't think of translator as a different person, okay? I'm talking as a data scientist wearing the hat of a translator. Data scientist being able to appreciate the business, right? And being able to use that business in his or her project, right? So that is the skill of translation is what I'm talking about when I say translator. It's not a different person in most cases. Okay, remember that, okay? So, but yes, because of all these reasons, translating a business problem into analytics problem can make or break the analytics project and, create or not create value for the organization. So translation is going to be a key skill over and above all the modeling skills that you guys are going to have. Right. So let's look at where translation comes into the picture in the analytics development lifecycle. Right? So you define a business problem, right? You sit with the business, define a business problem. What is the first thing that you do? You translate the analytics problem, into a business problem into analytics problem, which is what we just talked about in the case of McDonald's, right? Then what you do is you design a good solution. Once the analytics problem is defined, then you design a good solution architecture. This is basically what is a step-by-step that you will process that you will go through in order to create, the solution that is required. It might involve say 15 EDAs, 2 random forest model, 2 principal component analysis, 1 SVM, whatever it is that you want to do, right? That step-by-step process, right? That is required to solve the problem, and that includes testing as well, right? Then you do, once you do solution design, you actually do development, implement this design, on the ground. That will require data scientists, data engineers, and all the good people around them. And on the other side, it might also involve some application development so that whatever model you developed can be rendered as in a dashboard on a weekly basis or daily basis or whatever. Right? So solution design and then solution development. All right. And eventually you generate insights and give you recommendations. So on the one side, if it is a dashboarding or a mission to mission type of a project, you might just productionalize it, deploy it, productionalize it. On the other side, if it is a consulting type of a problem, you generate insights out of the model that you got, right, and come up with the right recommendations. And then you board a story and actually go do presentation to the business, telling that guys, this is what data is telling, and this is a strategy that you need to take. Right, and eventually, once either the dashboard or the presentation is consumed, it creates value. So at a high level, this is what analytics development lifecycle look like. Right? Now let's look at where all translation as a skill comes in very handy, right? So any thoughts before I go and show you my slides? Where do you think translation plays a role? Again, I'll try to open this chat window. I think that will be very useful. Any responses on the chat in the meanwhile by the time I try to open it, Sujit?
Yeah. So see, what you can do is, can you stop sharing once quickly? I'll tell you how to.
Yeah.
The chat. So if you can stop sharing.
Yes.
Yeah. So now.
Now I got it on the right side. Yeah.
But obviously you can't stop sharing and see the chat.
Yeah.
So what you need to do now is you got to click on share and share your presentation.
Yes.
Okay. So can you share it? Try again.
Yeah.
Yeah. So once it is shared, what happens is at the top you can see there's a view options for Zoom. Are you able to see at the top?
I see mute, start video, participants, Q&A, new share, annotate, remote control.
No, not that tab. Even above that, you should have a green color bar.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there you have view options. If you can exit full screen. So do you have option for exit full screen?
No.
There's no drop down.
I think I'm seeing a slightly different version from you.
Okay, and if you can scroll down, like if you just move your cursor down, can you see a mic button?
No.
You're not able to see any mic button? Okay. And neither can you see at the top view options.
View options is not here. I see stop share and then I see the green one that is the ID. That's about it.
In that entire bar, are you able to see any drop down or any place where you can click and see chat options?
No, participants is there.
Can you try Control H? Or Alt H, or yeah, Alt H. Oh, no, not on your presentation, on Zoom. So click on Zoom first and then press Alt H.
The Zoom thing is not opening, and that's the problem.
At the bottom, you have Zoom as a program.
I know.
Yeah. So it will not open anything. It will just enable the Zoom screen. At the top, you'll just see that options popping up.
Okay, chat. Yeah, I have it here. Yeah.
Now Alt H, does it work?
Yes.
So you can see the chat now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah.
All right.
We won't be able to see the chat. So
okay.
You can see the presentation.
All right. Okay, great.
So
the question to you guys was, where do you think in this entire analytics lifecycle journey, translation becomes comes in handy as an important skill? Yeah, somebody is studying first and last step. Yes, okay. There is a longer question. We'll come back to that in a little bit. Yes, generation recommendation after defining the business problem, first step. Yes, okay. So let's go back. So translation becomes a very important skill in a bunch of places. One is, right? Of course, once you start to know the business problem, they need to convert that into an analytics problem, and translation is a very, very important skill there, right? That requires you to understand the business context in the first place. And on the other side, understand analytics well so that you know what can be done, what cannot be done, have a perspective of what data is available, what data is not available, all right, and a few other things which we'll talk about in a little bit. Right? And secondly, once you solve the problem, right, to design and develop the solution, you need to generate insights. Again, in order to generate the right insights, you should have a perspective of how your model worked, what is the data saying, and what does the business really need, so that you can bridge the gap again and generate the right insights and recommendations for the business. So these are the two places where translation skill is an absolutely necessary skill, right? And there are two other places where you need to have a good perspective of the business as a data scientist. Okay, one is while you're designing the solution, right? Because you can design the solution only having the perspective of when and where it will be used, right? And how long it will be used, and what is the way it's going to be consumed. And we'll talk about a bunch of other dimensions they need to focus on. And eventually, in order to board the story and present it well to the business audience, you should know both business and analytics. If you are just only one of them, you cannot connect with the audience and do a good job of actually pushing through your recommendation, right? So the first and the fourth ones need very, very hard, really good translation skills, and the solution design and storyboarding need decently good translation skills. That's where translation is going to make or break your data scientist, your life as a data scientist. Fine. So any questions before I go further? Yes, exactly. I think it's everywhere. I think Ravi rightly pointed out. Let's take an example. Okay. So the idea is to develop an algorithm to decide, whether to approve or reject a loan, in a banking context. Okay, and I think it's a giveaway because I had given this example in the synopsis, of the talk. But in any case, let's go ahead. Okay. So what are the possible analytical formulations of this business problem? Right. So the business problem is that, Mr. Data Scientist, go prepare an algorithm for me that will automatically decide whether to give the loan or not to give the loan as soon as a new application comes. Okay, so what are the possible analytical problems of translations of this problem? Any thoughts? Now you can type in the chat window. No, all these things that you are telling, guys, are dimensions. That's exactly what I want you guys to stay away from. What you are telling is that these are all the features that we will consider. Okay, CIBIL score, credit history, background verification. Okay, all these are good, all right? But that is what we do as data scientists. That is the biggest mistake that you're telling age, right? All those things, right? Now, the moment there is a problem like this, we jump into the data and looking at what are the features that we need to add into the model. And based on that, we go ahead and build some model, right? But we don't take a step back, right? And ask the right questions. Okay, what is the right analytical problem, to be solved here, right? Now, I'll give you a few examples, right? Is the analytical problem, to emulate the past actions of the loan officer, right? In which case your data set is going to have, right, all these features on the left-hand side, and whether the loan officer in the past, right, I accepted or rejected the loan, right? So that is how your data set is going to look like. So it's a very different formulation, right? As compared to, I want to minimize the total number of defaults, right? Which basically means that you're going to use all your features and past data to see if this guy is going to default or not, right? And based on so you'll come up with a probability using your model, and then that probability is going to drive the decision that you're going to take. Whereas the third possible formulation is, okay, I want to maximize the profitability of the bank, right? In which case you are not going to consider the number of defaults, right? You want to take the probability of default, of all the people together. And based on all of them together, you will try to maximize the profitability of the bank, and you will be fine with a bunch of people defaulting, right? As long as it's not a huge amount, and stuff like that. So in each of these cases, you're going to have a very different problem formulation, and the impact on the bank, on the business is going to be quite different. In the first case, for example, if the loan officer had a bunch of biases in his mind, where he wanted to give the loan to say, only the white people and not black people, for example, right? Or people living in certain geographical areas and not living in certain geographical areas. All those biases are going to go to your model also, and this is going to have huge implications, right? And in the second, this one, you want to reduce the number of defaults, which basically means that irrespective of, taking profitability to consideration, even a low profit customer versus high profit customer, you are going to treat it exactly the same way as long as he is not going to default. Right? And in the third case, it's exactly the opposite, where you're okay with a bunch of defaulters as long as the total profitability of the bank is being maximized. Right? Yeah, the local goals influences global goals and all that. Right? So the deal is that each of these, and probably there are more formulations that's possible. I just thought of 3 from the top of my head. Right? Is going to have very different set of implications on on the solution to the business problem. While the business problem is exactly the same, the analytical problem can take any of these, and it has huge implications on the final result and how it's going to reflect on the bank's balance sheet. Right? Now, you being the translator, the data scientist wearing the translation hat, right, has to have a perspective of the business and the data science to figure out what is the right solution. So in this case, which one of these 3 do you think is right and why? Why third, Lalit? Why second, Ujjwal? Karunakar? Why first one, Anjali? Right? All of them are right, exactly, right? But they are very, very different. If you guys realize, all of them are right, but it's very, very different. And which one you choose really depends on the business context and what is the strategy that you guys have decided as a bank. Right? And that is why translating the business problem can make or break, right, your analytic solution, right? And if you get it wrong, you're going to lose a lot of value for the bank. ICICI took third option and HDFC took second. Okay, quite possible. I don't know that, but yes. But I hope you guys realize that these are very, very different, and this choice is very important before you actually start crunching the numbers. And this is what I'm calling as translation of business problem into analytical problem. Right? So do you guys just understand what this concept is?
Yeah, so really one question here.
Yeah.
So would it also be like all 3 are important, but would it also be on the end goal of the company that would decide the prioritization, like
yes,
which comes first, right?
Yes. End goal of the company is one of the bunch of dimensions that you need to consider, which we are going to talk about. Yes.
And it may not always be minimizing defaults, or it may not always be maximizing profits.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's why having the perspective as a data scientist, having the perspective of what is the bank after in terms of their business outcomes is very, very important. And it's not just the business outcomes. There are a few other things that you need to consider while translating, which we will talk about in a few minutes.
Awesome. Yeah.
Great. All right. Now let me guys, let you do one problem for me. I did the first one for you. So this is Bangalore Central Mall having a Diwali Dhamaka sale. Okay. And they come to you, the data scientist from INSEAD, to figure out what is the right discount prices on each of the items that they're going to sell. Okay. Now question to you is, what is the right analytical formulation of this problem? The business question is, recommend the right discount prices for the Diwali Dhamaka offer in Central Mall. Right? What is the right analytical question for this business question? So Raj is telling maximize sales, Balaji is telling maximize volume, historical data, no, that's not okay. Go ahead, go maximize profit. Old product, sell the old products. High volume product sale. More customers, you're talking about footfalls. Right customers, maximize profit with freebies. Right? Yeah. So I think you guys are all going in the right direction, right? There are a bunch of possible analytical formulations of this problem. Okay, one is obviously, okay, maximize the total revenue, that the Bangalore Central Mall is going to make out of this particular offer, right? Second one can be, okay, maximize the absolute profit of the mall, even if you don't sell all of them, right? Doesn't matter, but just make sure that you sell high profit items and maximize the total profit. Third one can be very, very different, which is basically push out the past inventory so that you make space for the next season's inventory, right? Which is very different from the first two. And in order to do the third, you might actually lose a lot of money, right? So fourth one can be just, maximize the footfall, because they want a lot of people to come and visit the mall because it has been newly renovated and you want them to experience it. Right? So there are a lot of different mathematical formulations of this business problem, and they can lead you to widely different results. Right? And they can have huge implications on the business. And if you get this wrong, your entire whatever analytical solution you come up with, the most sophisticated algorithms can be totally useless. Right? So it's like climbing the wrong mountain. and I realizing it after you reach the top. Great. Yeah, I think Siddharth also got it right, etc. Right. So there can be different analytical formulations. Right. Let's take one last example. Right. So YouTube has a recommendation engine. Right. Now assume that you are writing that recommendation engine, and the business problem that YouTube comes to you with is recommend the best videos to watch. What can be the possible analytical formulations of this business problem? So YouTube wants you to watch the best videos, and you being the data scientist, what are the possible analytical formulations you will do before you jump into the model? Topic wise, genre wise, okay, these are all the options. Yes, historical history search, yes. Maximize hits, subscriptions, viral videos, exactly. I think you guys got it, right? And minimize the number of unlikes, exactly. Right, exactly. You want to maximize subscriptions. Bang on, you guys are getting it right. So these are all possible, very, very different mathematical formulations, and they can have very, very different results, right? I just took a shot at a few ones. One is maximize the chances that you stay in the current session for as long as possible, right? That's one. So that in which case you will be choosing things that are the logical next videos of the videos that you are currently watching, right? To minimize the chances of being maximize the chances of being a loyal customer in the long run, which basically means that they will not show you the most logical next video that you would watch, but they will show you things that will broaden your perspective of what all you come to YouTube for, so that you keep you broaden your need for YouTube and keep coming back again and again and again. Which basically means that currently, if you are watching say Bollywood movies, then I as a recommendation I just introduce 1 or 2 Hollywood movies as a serendipity, so that I hope that you get hooked on to Hollywood movies and then come back to YouTube for a larger purpose eventually, right? Which is very different from the first one if you realize, right? Or third one, maximize the chances of you forwarding a video to a friend, which is a very different problem formulation. In which case, I make sure that I'll give you a very quick bite videos that will immediately make you excited and go share with a friend. That is a very different mathematical formulation and has a very different impact on how long you stay in YouTube, right? So these are just 3 examples. Every single business problem that comes will have many, many options like this in terms of how do you formulate the mathematical problem from the business problem, and it is going to have a huge impact. So that is the point of the matter, and I hope you realize that here. Now, how do we go about deciding which is the right mathematical formulation or analytical formulation? So that is the point of the matter. Okay. So there are 5 questions of which Lalit already gave the first one out, which is basically, it's the first question that you need to ask before you decide what is the right analytical formulation of a business problem is, what is the business outcome that we are after? Right? And I think Suchit already talked about it, and Lalit also talked about it, I think, on the chat window. All right. Unless you know the business outcome, you really cannot choose. And the problem is that in most cases, the business folks who are going to give you this problem statement won't have clarity of this business outcome. So how do you do? So what you need to do, right? You have to ask the right questions, dig deeper and deeper and deeper, and also tell them what are the trade-offs of choosing one choice of analytical formulation over the other, right? And then help them get that clarity as the right data scientist. Hey, probe more, exactly, right? And get the words of the customer, exactly, so on and so forth. All right. Now, that's the first one, okay? What are the other questions that you need to answer before finalizing the problem statement, analytical problem statement? One is obviously the right business outcome. Tell me a few more. Okay. The question, guys, is, I have listed on top 5 dimensions that I think, you need to consider before, deciding which is the right analytical formulation. The first one obviously is what is the business outcome, right? And what are the other 4 questions that you would ask, before deciding what is the right analytical formulation of a business problem. Okay, so legal compliance, timelines, budget, yeah, good one. What else? Good, your guys are going in the right direction. Time duration, yes. Profit, yes. Why that business outcome? Oh, it's a fantastic question. Second order business needs, yes, exactly. Benefits of the outcome, okay. Yes, risk, yeah, the risk is a very, very important point. Yeah, I think you guys are going in the right direction. Okay. So what I did was I looked at all these possibilities and I just listed top 5 that I think really matter. Of course, there's 5 is not a hard short number. You might need to ask 10 questions eventually in order to figure out what is the right analytical formulation. Okay, but let me walk you through my 5. Right. Second one is, what are the choices that need to be made and what are the trade-offs involved in those choices, right? As we saw in case of YouTube, in case of Central Mall, etc., making one choice has huge implications on other choices in terms of what they have to give up, right? If they, in the Bangalore Central Mall case, if they decide that they want to push out all the old inventory so that they can make space for the new inventory, they might be giving up on a lot of profit, right, in order to make space and push out as much volume as possible, right? And stuff like that. So every choice, so what are the choices and what are the trade-offs involved with each of those choices? You have to place that in front of business, and together as a team, you should take a call in terms of, what is the choice that you need to go with, right? And as a data scientist, you should have perspective on what are the trade-offs with those choices so that you can place them in front of the business, right? And choice based on facts or domain expertise, exactly, right? Third one is, what is the shelf life of the problem, right? And the solution. This is a very, very important question that most people don't ask. For example, in case of the Diwali Dhamaka offer, right? Now, so assume that you are 2 weeks ahead, before Diwali, you are doing, right? Now, what is the use of taking 2 months and coming up with the most sophisticated model out there, right? When Diwali is over within the next 2 weeks. So how long is it going to solve the problem, and how long is it going to take to do all the change management required to implement this solution? For example, if you say, okay, give a list of prices for each of the SKUs, the store needs at least a week to actually go put up those prices on each of those shelves, right? So your total, lead time is problem solution lead time plus change management lead time, right? You need to take both of them into consideration and then see, within what time frame you need to solve the problem. And I would rather do a 80% correct solution, right, within the time frame than do 100% correct solution after the time is lost. Right? So what is the shelf life of the problem and the solution is a very, very important question. Right? Next question is, who will consume and how? Right? So suppose, for example, you're talking about a large chain like a Big Bazaar or a Central and stuff like that. Right? Now there'll be store managers across all major cities. Now, if in the way you would, give it off to them, right, and make them consume. For example, if it is a recurring thing and you need to give them every Monday morning as a price list, the way you would do it is very, very different from if you're doing it in one shot and the customer is sitting in front of you, right? You need to think of a dashboard that will scale. You need to think of something that will refresh in a matter of few seconds and not take 10 minutes to refresh and stuff like that. Right? So who are the consumers and how they will consume your results? Right? Is it to a dashboard? Is it to a phone call? Is it to a PPT? Right? And how often do they consume it? Right? And how educated are they? All these are all the considerations that you need to do in order to come up with the right solution. Exactly, creating the right customer profile, Aditya is saying. Yes. Last one. Okay, what is the impact of solving this problem? Again, you might spend $1 million, right, and hire top 5 data scientists and take 6 months to do this problem. But if the total impact is only 100 rupees, right, I'm just giving an extreme example, then what's the point? Yeah, exactly. What is the ROI of solving this problem? So these are some of the questions that I took a shot at, and obviously you guys also asked some of the things. These are all the questions that you need to ask before deciding what is the analytical formulation that you will go with, and spend the rest of the time of the project on, right? And this skill of asking these right questions, sitting with the business, placing it in front of them in terms of, okay, boss, these are the trade-off, and this is the formulation that we'll go with, and this is the implications that you will face because of this. That having that conversation is a very, very important skill set of data scientist, and that's what we call as translation skill set. Okay, so let me take a pause before I go further and let you guys ask me any questions. I'm looking at the chat window now. All right, so let's take an example now. Okay, a credit card company wants to personalize offers to its customers. Okay, the business problem is that send the right promotion to the right customer. That's all they will come to you with. Pankaj is asking a question. Do you do these activities in sprint? What do you mean, Pankaj? How about collecting feedback? Absolutely necessary. But even before the feedback, if you have gone totally wrong direction, you're wasting a lot of money. What challenges you face in meeting with the management? Yes, so the biggest challenge is that they don't understand what you're trying to do. So if you go talk about a random forest, it's very random for them. So you need to talk in their language, which is very, very hard. Means activities, new model framework. If customer does not have data, You say no customer, no to customer. Absolutely, we say no to customers if they don't have data. But in many cases, we can help them get the right data or proxy data, as we talked about in the beginning. What is categorization? We are getting there in a minute. We are getting to this problem. Okay, let's solve this problem, guys. Okay, so the question is, what is the right analytical formulation for this problem? And the business problem is that send the right promotion to the right customer. Right? How do you go about doing? Even before you do customer segmentation, you're talking to Chirag, you're talking about customer segmentation, you're directly jumping into solution. Okay, I am asking you, what is the right analytical problem to solve? Yes, what is the objective of this task? Exactly, that's the right question, Vikram, right? What promotions are there? Exactly, without even knowing what promotion, what is the promotion? What's the point of doing all the recommendation engine to map the customer and the promotion? Exactly. What is the expectation of the customer? Great, Babu. What is the outcome of promotions, right? To maximize sale or maximize credit. Has worked well in the past. Okay, fantastic. Really, really good questions, guys, right? And I want you to develop this skill of asking these questions before you directly jump into segmentation or whatever that you want to do here. Okay, that is the point that I'm trying to make from this presentation. Like, how long is the promotion? Exactly, Dheeraj. So let's go ask the 5 questions here. Okay, so the business problem is that send the right promotion to the right customer. Now let's go ask these 5 questions. Okay, so what is the business outcome we are after, right? And let's look at them. This is the actual problem. So let's look at the thing. Right. So business outcome thereafter is that you want to maximize the redemption rate of the offers to make the customers more engaged with the company. Okay, so more redemption means that customers are more engaged with the credit card company. That's what it means. Due to which they want to maximize the number of redemptions. Okay. Next, what are the choices that need to be made? Right. So choices are that if you send offers too often, then the customer will get offended. But if you don't send enough offers, she will not be engaged with you. Due to which you have to find a good middle ground where you're sending enough number of offers, right? Which is likely to have redemption but not offend the customer. What is the shelf life of the problem? This is a 0% EMI offer on Maruti cars bought before Christmas. Okay, and today is already December the 7th. Okay, today is already December 7th, and this is 0% EMI offer on Maruti cars bought before Christmas. So you know the shelf life of the problem and how quickly you need to solve it. And who will consume this and how, right? The campaign manager will use it. Use this to send one-time email, mail, not email, okay, mail, physical mail to and a colorful booklet to the recipient's mailing address. So he is going to send a physical mail. Assume that it takes 3 days. Assuming the guy is going to live in a city, right? And it will take at least 2 weeks lead time for the customer to make a decision and purchase a car. The car is not a overnight decision, right? Let's assume that they need at least 2 weeks to make a decision. And it takes 3 days for this guy to send the booklet. Now, how quickly you need to do, given that it's already December 7th, right? That's how many days you have for solving this problem, right? What is the impact of solving this problem? The car company will obviously give you some commission on every car that is sold, right? So impact is maximum of 2 crores of benefit. Right? So having all these things in mind, then what is the analytical formulation that you can have? That's the question. Now, I have not written the solution here, but you guys can type in what is the analytical formulation that you will have given the responses to these questions. Segmentation of customers. Okay, what else? Identify categorization spent for user. Exactly. Promo performance by geography. Okay. Give offers to maximize profitability and usage of the card. We're not asking for profitability here. No, the whole idea is not profitability. That's what the first question says. It is about maximizing the probability that the customer will respond. Who has purchased the car some years back? Exactly. Right? Somebody has purchased a car earlier this year. You don't want to send the offer to that guy. Exactly. Customer's financial status, which in other words is income. Right? Yeah, I think you guys are getting it. Right? So the few possible formulations are, look for customers who have bought a car at least a few years ago and not anytime recently, and who generally respond to offers, right? And who you think financially have the capability to purchase the car, right? And doing all this within a matter of say 3-4 days window that you have, because they need at least 3 days to send that offer and 2 weeks to make the decision. Right now, you should do whatever can be possible within this time frame, right? And having all these constraints in mind. Right? There can be 100 different problem formulations, but as long as you have these things in mind, you will be good. Right? So yeah, that's the point that we are trying to make. I think you guys got the point. Okay. So with this, let me open the floor for questions. Any questions at all?
Shri, I think was a very, very handy use case. As you see, a lot of our audiences here, they actually have some idea, so they could actually capture a lot of your questions and they could answer them.
Yes.
So yeah, so the good point here is a lot of them could actually make a lot of sense from what you said, and probably this is one of the most handiest session that we have had in a while, I would say. So let me kind of collate few of the questions that people are going to ask. I'll ask you the common questions instead of going to every question. So the first one is, if you can roll back to that initial slide around business, the 5 questions that you had asked.
Yes.
Yeah. So what is the business outcome we are after? Now, for each of these questions, if you see, there are different stakeholders, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And for each of these questions, how do you go about talking with the stakeholders to realize? Because a lot of the biggest challenge is a lot of customers don't realize what they need.
Exactly.
So how do you solve this problem from a stakeholder's perspective? How do you kind of sit with them, and how do you formally kind of come to a solution?
So what we have typically, I don't know if there is one answer to this question, but how we have typically done is, we answer these questions, right? In terms of, for example, this is what I think is the outcome. Let's assume that, let's take an actual example. No? Let's assume that the chief marketing officer of HDFC has come to us with this credit card problem. Okay. Hypothetical thing. Okay. Now what we do is, what I think is the business outcome, and then I go make a set of trade-offs. Okay, I'll take a bunch of possible formulations and come up with my hypothesis of what are the possible trade-offs involved with this, right? And go take my shot at the solutions to answers to the other 3 questions, and they go sit with him, telling boss, I think my outcome I think is that you want to maximize the number of redemptions. That's what I think. Am I right, or am I going totally off, right? Or do you have a different outcome, for example, like maximizing the revenue or maximizing the profitability of the bank? Right? So I go ask that question, and typically he won't know the solution, answer to that question. Okay. Then I say, okay, but all these are the choices, and each of these choices have this particular trade-offs. Right. So I write the trade-offs involved. Right. And then he realizes, oh man, okay. So the moment I choose maximizing redemption as my goal, I am reducing, the profitability or, the total revenue that I'm going to make out of this entire thing. Okay. Am I ready for it? Right. So when you show the trade-offs is when the bulb glows. Right. And then he'll raise, no, I don't want you to lose money. Right. That's how it starts. Right. And then shelf life is very straightforward. If you understand the overall context and tell him who is going to use, how, etc., the shelf life and all, will become obvious. So the moment you ask him the right questions. And what is the impact of solving the problem? Once you have the answers to first and second questions, then you have to calculate the impact and then go to him telling this is going to be the impact. Are you okay with it? Right? Again, so you have to open up the things to him. The best goldmine here is the second question, where you place the trade-offs in front of him. That's when he will realize that what he is asked for. Right, and the implications of that. Till then, they will not know, and they will not know why they are asking what they are asking. And a very good question, though.
So, if I can summarize this answer, so what I understand from your statement is that first is it's like if the customer is in dark, you show them different tunnels from where you can see light.
Fantastic.
Options that you can show them, that these are the options, and this will click that bulb in their head. Okay, this is not the tunnel that I want to end up. I want to go to this tunnel. So this is the answer that is more suited for my need, right?
So then the options in terms of tunnels, and show the implications of taking one option over the other.
Right. So they'll be able to decide better that this is the path that I want to choose.
Yes.
Right? Okay.
And now, the most typical thing that happens in the retail world, because I've worked in retail for like 15 years now. Most typically, they will come say that, okay, can you price it right for me so that I can push out this time's inventory and make place for the next season. But the moment you show that you make an algorithm to push out maximum inventory, they're going to lose a lot of money. Then they'll say, no, that's not what I'm going for.
True.
I don't want to lose money. Then that's when they'll realize.
Yeah, and I think you already answered one more question, which was around if the customer already knows that I have to push out inventory, why do they need analyticians? So, friends, where you have to realize is analyticians gives that trade-off information that if you choose this step, this is what you're going to land up with. They know the options, but they don't know what is the outcome. So the outcome the implications and the outcomes can be only shown by an analytics guy who can actually see the numbers and decide and tell them. So it's not that a lot of businesses don't know what is the right way forward. They know the right way forward, but they don't know what is the final implication of the way. And that is where you need an analytician to kind of prove it to them. So yeah, thank you. I think Srini, that is really important. Thank you for the insight for this question. So I'll go to the next question. Now this is a little bit around say the roles that people play in your team. So I mean, I don't want to kind of go to some other company. Let's focus on your company, the Math company. Uh-huh. So who plays the role of a translator? So do you have
fantastic question?
Yeah.
So I'll tell you the most ideal scenario. Okay. The most ideal scenario, for example, is HDFC Bank headquarters is right here. Assume HDFC Bank is the client. The headquarters is right here, and then the data scientist team sitting right with them. Right, and working with them, which basically means that every single data scientist has to be a translator. Okay, so that's the most ideal scenario. And typically, what happens is that that's not how the world works, because client is in a different location than the team, the data science team. Right. So what we do is we generally place one guy as the chief translator. He's the guy that we can trust the most, with respect to both analytics and business knowledge, right? And he spends maximum time with the team, with the clients, right? And the rest of the team sitting out of the whatever location they're sitting out, right? They have a good idea about business, but they're predominantly data scientists, right? So that's how it works. So there'll be one chief translator who sits out of the client location, and rest of the data science team sits out of their own office. So that's the more real scenario.
So you have,
and I'm talking irrespective of whether the client is a different client in a consulting context or an in-house client in case of a captive.
Is this kind of a guy who understands domain in some sense more than the regular people, the regular data scientists?
Really, yes. Realistically, yes. Ideally speaking, the rest of the data scientists would also understand domain as much. That's when they will be valuable for the organization.
Okay, so you would place them as like on similar levels as data scientists as well?
Yes.
Okay, and you won't specifically call them business analysts, right?
That's a difficult question. Yeah, we technically could. Okay. Now, business analyst as a role, is basically has a connotation of governance structure. Okay, business analysts report into the business. Okay, they don't report into the data science team, and that's where the typical gap happens. Okay, but the business analyst is a guy who understands business and analytics equally well. That is the definition. But when you call him a business analyst, typically he reports into the business, and that's where it works well. Whereas the data science team reports into the head of analytics. Right? And whereas what we are talking about in this case, the translator that we talked about also reports into the data science team and the head of analytics. That's the only small difference. But skill set wise, yes, exactly the same skill set. The translator in the data science team versus the business analyst reporting into the business have exactly the same skill set.
If I can talk from my experience, I would say in one of our situations, we had a guy who was very strong in the business side, but wasn't too much of an analytical guy. So we had two people to match this. We had a person who understood business and analytics well enough, and one guy who understood business excellently. So we had both of them placed at the customer location. So a hybrid approach as well, right?
Sure. Yes, exactly. I mean, there are all kinds of permutations and combinations.
Yeah. So there's no right or wrong demarcation, friends. You cannot give some title directly that this is the perfect person to be sitting at customer location. It is a person who understands both the sides. And one more question that comes up as a follow-up question is, a lot of people in our session today come from technical background. And obviously, when you work in tech, you work in many domains, or you work in one domain lifelong. It doesn't matter, but you're not always a guy who's very good at domain. So the question here is, how do you recommend these folks to kind of transition into data science? Okay, over a period. Obviously, when you started your career, you were not as good as you are right now in retail, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, what is the right approach for these folks to kind of transition from a technical role to a data science or data analyst role? So, what is your suggestion to them?
Yeah, great. Okay, I don't know why this question keeps coming. I gave a talk about exactly this yesterday. Yeah, so I wish I had that slide that I was talking about yesterday. But yeah, try to envision what I'm trying to say, guys. Okay, so think of it as a line, a horizontal line in the middle of the slide. Empty slide is there. There is a horizontal line. Okay, below the horizontal line are all what I call as the base skills of analytics, or the what I call as cost of entry skills. It might be a Python. It might be a mathematical knowledge of a random forest. It can be, base skill of how to do an EDA in advanced using advanced Excel, or the base skill of what EDAs to do in order to solve a business problem, etc. So these are the base skills that are cost of entry for you in order to get into a data science team. Okay. Now, this will not differentiate you. This will not take you up in your career, etc. But without these skills, you will not even get a seat on the table, or you won't even get a data science job. Okay, unless you are super lucky. Okay. Then above this line are what I call as accelerators for your career. Okay. Accelerators, or the first accelerator is obviously the skill to translate business problem into analytical problem. That's why we spent an hour today on this one, right? And second one is the skill to get insights out of the, to solve analytical problem, get business insights out of it, right? And next is art of storytelling, where you can abstract the insights from the model or whatever that you have built, and being able to present a very convincing story in a matter of, say, 2 slides or 3 slides, right? Or maximum 5 slides. You can never go beyond 5 slides in a presentation, right? And present a story to compel somebody to take action. And of course, last biggest skill is obviously solution architecture. That only have some amount of experience, you can do solution architecture, right? And stuff like that. These are all the accelerator skills. Right? Now, how I would go about doing is, you have to obtain all the base skills and get an entry into a data science team. Right? Now, then you start developing one of these skills by get one. The other skills can be developed only once you have an opportunity, right? And opportunity comes once you get into the team only, right? Once you get into the team, then try to start. For example, presenting to client in some way, shape, or form, asking these 5 questions and translating a business problem into analytical problem, etc., where somebody recognizes your talent and gives you 1 or 2 opportunities where you can actually go visit a client place, ask the right questions, etc., right? And then the success builds over success, and you will get into a virtuous cycle, right? Now, so to do all that, you have the base skills and the cost of entry and entry into the team, right? That's what you do as at this stage where you are trying to get from IT into the analytics roles or companies, right? And beyond that, what you do is, try to develop these skills or exhibit these skills in some way, shape, or form, so that somebody gives an opportunity to go sit in front of a client or, go present to a client, etc. And then it gets on to a virtuous cycle. That's how I would go about.
I just made some rough notes on the screen.
Yes, exactly.
So I'll just quickly summarize. So we have, first is to understand at a very high level, there are 2 parts to it. First is you've got to develop base skills such as Python, machine learning, EDA, and these we also can call as cost of entry, which means that ideally this is what you have to have or have to spend to get into this particular role. The second thing that you can do to accelerate in this role is, which we also call as accelerators. This is about how good are you at translating business problems to analytical problems. How good are you at converting these analytical solutions to insights, business insights? How good of a storyteller are you? And finally, there's something called a solutions architect, which we'll discuss a little while later. And finally, if you want to really transition into this field properly, first get started with the base skills. And then over a period, you want to build expertise on the accelerators as well. So is that summary fair enough?
Yes.
Okay.
The idea is that as you start doing accelerator in some way, shape, or form, once you are in the team, the business knowledge will start developing automatically. So I would call it as a virtuous cycle, where you get some small business knowledge based on who your teammates or your manager or whoever helps you out, and try your hands at one of the accelerators things, and then due to which you get more business knowledge, and then etc. It gets to the virtuous cycle, and that's how we develop business knowledge. There is no textbook for business knowledge.
True. A lot of people are under this false assumption where I have seen a lot of people coming and telling me, how do I become a solution architect? Now, that's why I kept this question a little. So, so what a lot of people don't realize is there's time and effort that goes into it to become or to get to that particular place. Nobody can just jump a journey. It's a journey where you start from point A and you have to cover point B, C, D, F. Only then you reach Z. So we have to take our own time and effort to reach all of these stages, and without covering all of the stages, technically it doesn't make jumping positions.
Exactly.
So Srini, what does solution architect imply? And if you can give a little high level overview as to how does one transition into that particular role?
Okay, so I'll tell you what solution architecture means, right? So assume that you're a data scientist who understand 100 different types of regressions and 15 different types of classification models, etc. Okay, that's great. Okay, but just by knowing that, right? Suppose I give you assortment optimization problem in a retail context. Okay, so assortment optimization, for those of you who don't know retail, is basically what are all the items that I need to keep on shelf. So in the shelf, I have in the retail store, I have only this much space. Okay, very finite space. Now, but a number of items available in the market that I can put here is like infinite, right? Literally millions of units and items, right? So which are the items that I need to put on the shelf so that either I can maximize my revenue or maximize footfall, profitability, whatever is my goal, right? So how do you make that optimization is the question. That is what is assortment optimization, right? Now, knowing 100 different types of regression and 500 different types of classification models is very different from coming up with a step-by-step solution to this problem. In order to come up with a solution to this problem, you need to first of all understand retail a little bit, understand trade-offs involved. That's one part of the thing. Second part of it is, you need to come up with, okay, these are all the 15 EDAs I need to do in order to get the right insights about these items and these customers, and what are the implications of taking off one item from the shelf and keeping another item. What are the implications, etc. So you need to come up with what are the set of EDAs that you need to do, and what are the algorithms that I need to be applied in which order, so that I get to maximize and I get to do the global maxima, as somebody was talking about in order to solve the assortment optimization problem, right? So knowing regressions and classification models to coming up with a step-by-step EDA and modeling process for assortment optimization, you are two very different beasts. You need the first one to do this, but that's not sufficient, right? So in over and above knowing all the analytics, you need to have a little bit of experience in knowing what will happen. If I take a particular choice, of a model is another model, right? For example, in a forecasting context, now doing forecasting in order to figure out the right drivers, is very, very different from doing forecasting for figuring out the right forecast number, right? So both of them are a forecasting model, but how you formulate the problem is very, very different. So you need to know the trade-offs involved in choosing one algorithm versus the other, right? And how do you come up with a step-by-step knowing all these trade-offs and eventually coming up with something that will give you the business outcome. So that's what is solution architecture. What skill sets you need to do? You need to have, obviously, you need to know the business context. You need to know a lot of different types of algorithms. But more importantly, you should have done something, over the last few years in where you got a feel of if you do, take particular choices in algorithms, so what all will happen if you do that. And if you choose MAP, over R square, what are the implications versus choosing R square or versus MAP? What are the implications on the final number? So you know all that, and that can come only through experience. There's no theoretical textbook for it.
There's no shortcut to success. That's the one. Yeah. So I think Srini, thanks for your time. It's been like more than an hour and a half that you've been with us. It was a 45-minute session, but apologize for the delay. But anyway, to wrap it up quickly, I'll do a little shameless promotion for all our friends out here. So the shameless promotion is, Srini, as you see, you got really good questions from a lot of these folks, and a lot of them are eager to get into the space of data science. Does the math company have any kind of provisions to kind of get into some kind of internships or full-time roles? So this is on behalf of the audience who are actively participating today.
I can figure out. I don't have an answer right now, but I can figure out. We'll be in touch. Yeah.
Great. So if you do find some activity that you might want to share with the audience, and trust me, they are really good folks and they really want to kind of break into this field, they'll be more than glad to assist you and your company. So
absolutely,
So a little promotion from my side. And friends, before we wrap up the session, Monday evening we have the second session for our Career Launchpad, which will be hosted by Manav. Today it was a great, insightful, and I would say a very hands-on session by Srini, who's one of the industry veterans and a very popular face in the analytics field. Especially Math Company has been making a lot of news. So I would really appreciate if all of you follow Srini on LinkedIn. All of you check out what Math Company is doing in real world. tons of things to learn from them. And Srini, it was great hosting you. It was an honor that we could actually learn so much from you. Thank you for your time and effort, Srini.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for listening, and thanks guys for listening and coming up with very, very good questions.
Okay, Srini, so in case we have any further queries that people would want to kind of get clarification on, I'll just collate and I'll send you out.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, I'm available on LinkedIn also, so as and when I get time.
So friends, feel free to connect to Srini. He's a really helpful guy, and I must say, like, he was very proactive when it came to accepting our invitation that he wanted to kind of come and share his knowledge. Thanks a lot for that, Srini. Thank you.
Thanks, Sujit. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you. So friends, a big hand for Srini, and Srini, you can see everybody's thanking you here on the chat box.
Thank you.
And
thank you guys, appreciate that, and we'll be in touch.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Srini. Take care.
Yep.